Okay, we've started. Let's go and get started. We have a lot to cover and respect people's times. Maybe others will join. Um, Again, thank you for being with us on this is our last official um, coaching session. That doesn't mean that we won't coach individually. If you have an issue about something, or as instructors, if we see that there is an issue, we may say we need to have a meeting, and we have the right to do that. So, but officially, this is the last one scheduled um, for the semester. Um, the plans this evening are that and you will hear some of the same things we've talked about on Tuesday night again tonight, but it won't hurt you. And then we're going to take it deeper. We're going to actually cover all 4 tasks of the AAPTEL completely. We're going to give you some additional information. Well, when I say additional, we're going to tell you the same thing in a different way that you have from your template and from your the AAPTEL helpful hints document. We've each one taken a section, and we're going to break it down, hopefully even better, and make it more clear for you as you're moving forward. And with that in mind, I think Dr. Hamilton, I think you had task 1, didn't you?
I do have task 1.
I'm going to go ahead and have at it. It's yours.
Thank you. I'm ready. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. We are glad that you're here. So I do have the AAPTEL task 1. And remember that the AAPTEL, now the AAPSOL was more focused on students learning, that the AAPTEL is the analysis and action plan for teacher empowerment and leadership. So in the AAPTEL task 1, you have 2 prompts. And your first prompt is a literature review. You have 5 sections that you will be researching information about. You'll need a minimum of 3 references for each of these 5 sections. So that means you will have a minimum of 15 references that will be cited in task 1, prompt 1, and will also be referenced in your reference section of your AAPTEL. You must include the researchers of Todd Whitaker, Darling Hammond, and Robert Marzano. So there are your 5 areas that you'll be researching: building efficacy and empowerment, research, results-oriented professional development, recruitment, placement, and mentoring of school staff, approaches to and for evaluation of school staff, and teacher leadership and decision-making. And you will have a minimum of 3 references for each of those 5 areas, a total of a minimum of 15 total references. Then in task 1, prompt 2, you're going to create a checklist and a survey. And that's going to be based on the research that you completed in prompt 1 and your literature review. The survey is going to determine teacher perceptions. So you're going to give the survey to the teachers, whether it's a Google form, a survey monkey, a paper pencil, whatever it is. You're going to give them this survey, and they're going to complete this anonymously. And then you're going to collect the results. And this is their perception. This is what they think. And then you're going to have a checklist. And that checklist is going to be based on observations. What do you really see? Because what they think and what you see could be different things. So the checklist could be observations, walkthroughs, instructional rounds, those kinds of things. Anything where you can go observe. So now you're not going to be doing that in task 1. In task 1, you're just creating the checklist and the survey. You're not doing anything with it. We'll talk more about that, what you're going to do with it in task 2. So you're going to create in task 1, prompt 2. You're not going to do anything with it. You're not going to use it until task 2, a checklist and a survey. Of course, the survey determines the teacher's perception. Where can you get these things from? You can pull survey questions from the North Carolina Teachers Working Conditions Survey. And some people in South Carolina have pulled this up and used it as a source as well. In South Carolina, you do have advanced ed that is not as detailed as the Teachers Working Conditions Survey, but it certainly has components that you can pull out and use.
And Dr. Hamilton, and again, advanced ed, it may be referred, but it's Cognia, COGNIA. So that's another name for advanced ed. I think they may have moved to that, but some of you still know it as advanced ed. So
Oh,
it's
thank you. I didn't realize that.
one and the same, Cognia, COGNIA.
Thank you.
Okay.
Saved. Done it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I did not know that had changed. These things do need to be research-based, reliable, and if your school or district is already using some kind of a walkthrough checklist, then that is just perfectly fine. Now, remember on your survey, if you ask teachers to answer a lot of questions and do a lot, they're not going to do your survey. It's going to be too much. So we want you to make sure that this is something manageable. So for your survey, 10 items at the most is fine. You're going to ask questions like, do they have input into the budget? Do they sit in on teacher interview panels? What are the leadership opportunities do they have outside of the classroom? So you're going to cite where you found these things from, and you're going to just create the survey. That's it. In task 1, you're not going to do anything with it. So here's a survey example, like where you might have 5 questions, and you would ask them if they strongly disagree, are they neutral, do they agree, or do they strongly agree? And so here's an example of a survey. And then again, in task 1, prompt 2, all you're going to do is create the survey. You're going to have a nice little figure in task 1, prompt 2 of your survey, but you're not going to do anything with the survey in task 1. Then when you get ready for your checklist, you can always still look at the AAPTEL helpful hints. Don't forget, you're going to be looking for like Marzano's best high yield, most 9 high yield strategies. How are they doing with time management? Do they have clear learning goals? These are the kind of things you're going to be looking for. I always suggest on your checklist, even if it's something that you're using with your district, to have a little place over to the side where you can make little anecdotal notes that will help you remember, so that it's more than just quantitative check yes or no, but you have some qualitative notes to accompany it, because that will make your process much richer and help you understand what's going on better. Here's an example that's also in your AAPTEL helpful hints. This one is based on, and this takes up 2 slides, but this one is based on Marzano's 9 high yield strategies. So you would just say, you would go in and observe, you would say, yes, I saw this, no, I didn't, and any kind of notes that you wanted to. During COVID, we were saying a minimum of 3 observations. So anywhere a minimum of 3 to 5 observations, the more you do, the better your product will be, and the more valid your information will be, and just a better picture you'll have of what's going on in your school. And then, of course, we do have the rubric that's in with your handbook. So always look at that rubric when you're doing any of your work through any of your 6 evidence artifacts, and say, what does accomplished say? So in this case, for task 1, it says that you have developed an extensive literature review with a bibliography that is thoroughly aligned with the best practice areas identified in the prompt, and your checklist and your survey. You have to have 2 things, a checklist and a survey, is effectively and thoroughly designed as an instrument to aid in observing the relationship between those research best practices and what's really happening in the school setting. And then this doesn't include this, but for your survey, the teacher perception as well. So that is task 1.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. And again, all of these PowerPoints will be found under week 8 in Blackboard. And when you go to week 8, not only will you find the ones that we have for tonight, you will find some that we have archived as well. There's a lot of things in there that we've done, but it's just good stuff. And sometimes you may need to look at one more thing, and that's one more thing you can look at that may help you make things more clear if you're having a problem understanding anything. You have any questions of Dr. Hamilton before we move on to task 2? Again, all of this was covered on this past Tuesday evening. We all covered this pretty thoroughly, I think, on Tuesday evening. Any questions? Okay, Dr. Revis, task 2.
Okay, can you see my screen, task 2?
Yes.
Okay, so I am borrowing, and you know we always do that in education, Doctors Crawford and Hamilton's archived from last semester's AAPTEL task 2. Guys, I really appreciate, this is already posted, and I really appreciate being able to use it. I couldn't improve on it, so I'm using this. So just as an overview on task 2, and you heard Dr. Hamilton say many times, task 1, you're creating the survey and checklist. In task 2, you're actually going to use those. And just as an overview, you're going to administer the survey to members of your staff, and you're going to conduct classroom walkthroughs using your checklist. Now, once you have your data points from the survey and walkthroughs, then you will meet with your PLC to do a data analysis. And you are going, the focus is here to do the data analysis, but also identify possible gaps between the research in those 5 areas that you did in task 1 to what was observed in your walkthroughs and what was perceived on your surveys. So you will describe your data collection strategies and the criteria used in identifying the gaps between practice and research-based practices. And you're going to create that needs assessment, again, aligning and addressing those 5 areas from the literature review that you do in task 1. So after describing your data collection, there are these 5 areas that you and your PLC will examine, and the question will be, what are our gaps between the research that we found? If a school is truly building efficacy and empowerment, what does that look like? And then what you found through your data collection instruments. And this PowerPoint gives some great examples here in just a moment. So the data are collected and analyzed in collaboration with your PLCs. Okay. And here, this is all narrative work. So diving deeper into our rubric and into the prompt, we're going to break this down a little bit more. In prompt 1, you should begin prompt 1 by describing your data collection strategies. Again, just reiterate the tools and the instruments and what research you used or foundation you used to develop those. How many teachers did you observe? Again, talking about the survey instrument as well as your checklist. How many teachers were surveyed? And by what method was the survey delivered? Just giving some background about the administration and how you operationalize your 2 instruments. Next, the prompt says, you will identify the criteria in the process of identifying the gaps between practice and research-based practices. So this is the gap analysis that you're going to complete with your PLC members. You are actually going to talk about your data and discuss how you're going to analyze that data. And you will talk about, did your PLC meet at school, Zoom, however, and of course you want to include in your appendices a meeting agenda with notes that will just help strengthen this piece that you're trying to demonstrate that you did involve your PLC in your data analysis and in your gap analysis. Diving further into prompt 1, under each of the 5 headings, you and your PLC will triangulate your research, survey results, and observation checklist results. So here are just some thoughts. You're going to go back to those 5 headings of research that you did in prompt 1. And that's going to be, of course, your heading. you're going to have the first paragraph. You want to start out by just summarizing the research. You don't do it completely over. You're summarizing some of the main points of the research that you did in task 1. And then take your survey and you talk about, what did teachers self-report? I would expect to see things like 85% of the teachers report that they had input on developing the budget for our school. 90% of our teachers report that they have been invited to be in on the interview process when hiring new teachers, etc. So we would expect to hear or see, rather, that data reported to us with percentages when you talk about your survey. On your
Dr. Randall,
observation.
may I
Yes.
say one thing while you're saying that? Remember that APA says that when you're writing numbers, you don't begin a sentence with a number, and you don't begin with a number percentage. Actually, the best practice recommends that you find another way of saying it so that the percentage is, or the number is, not the first word in a sentence. Anyway, but if you do, then just remember, you can't put the number 85%. You would have to write it out 85%. So just remember to make sure you're following APA as you're doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. So my examples that I just gave you were not very good examples. You would start along the lines of, when examining budget input, 90% of the teachers say da 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 da.
Right.
So you just reword your sentence structure so that you're not starting with that percentage first. And of course, you want to pull in any information from your checklist that connects to the topic. So one thing that you would be looking at in your checklist may be, were there overwhelming majority of the items observed at high rates? And that could be an indicator of high teacher efficacy as they feel empowered in their classroom to engage in that instruction that you may be doing as a school. And then working with your PLC at the end of each section, you want to identify the gaps. So you're recapping your research in each of these areas, recapping the research, reporting related survey data points, reporting related observation checklist data points, and then ending with a summary of any gaps that you have identified. And that follows along the same way with results-oriented professional development. And here are some just key questions that you can use in your data analysis PLC. What did teachers report about meaningful staff development? Do they have input on the options of staff development? Do they feel the staff development is meaningful or effective? And then so on. Recapping the research, report your data points from your survey, report any corresponding data points from your observation checklist, and then identify your strengths and possible gaps. And then down below is the same thing, except with recruitment, placement, and mentoring. And you can read those. And again, this is already posted as it was archived from last semester. Approaches to enforce staff evaluation. Recap the research, report your survey results, report your checklist results, and then identify strengths and gaps. And then teacher leadership and decision-making. You're going to use that same kind of model all the way through this prompt 1. And then at the end of prompt 1, we suggest that you clearly summarize your work in prompt 1. At the end of the section, synthesize what you and your PLC discovered and write a brief statement clearly identifying the areas of greatest need or gap between the research and best practice. And your evaluators like for this to be very prominent, and they're going to want to scroll down to the end and of prompt 1 and see what you've put in there, or see what you found, a summary or a synthesis of the gaps that you discovered.
Dr. Revis, just an observation right there. Remember in the AAPTEL, remember you had to identify the most pressing need for student achievement. This is with dealing with teachers. It's basically the same thing. The most pressing need based on all the work that you've done working with teachers in your school. Remember, we told you that your job as an administrator is not to teach children. Your job is going to be to teach teachers and work with teachers.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Stedman. All right, so summary of prompt 1, your gap analysis and needs assessment, taking the work from task 1 and doing something with it. So task 1 and 2 work back and forth with each other. So make sure you're using your helpful hints. And there are great examples all the way through that helpful hints. And make sure that you're involving your PLC and administrator, if possible, as you're doing the analysis and determining your gaps. Okay, now let's look at prompt 2. In each of the 5 areas in prompt 2, you will show what you describe narratively in tables, charts, and graphs, and those will be identified as figures. This is very much like what you did in your prompts in the AAPTEL. But remember, now you are identifying, you're taking those data points from your checklist and your survey, and you're going to show those. So this is an example of an individual 5th grade whole group reading. And I think this may be an individual teacher's list. I can't see exactly what it says down here in the note. Now, you just don't want to put a figure without any context. Tell us what it is and what it represents.
And Dr. Revis, let's make a point. When you put your figures in, make sure that they're legible. If they shouldn't be blurry like this. This is an example, but it may not be the best example. Make sure that you make it large enough that it's legible for anybody that's looking at it.
Correct. I do not know what I've done, but I have gotten off of here somehow. That is just, that in this actually is a summary of the survey result or the checklist of best practices is actually a summary of all of them. And then you would want to have a summary of your survey results. And that may be done in pie charts or however you want to describe that. I would think pie charts would be a good way to do it, but provide some context. Don't just throw a figure out there and think that we know what it's representing or is describing what you are wanting us, the takeaways you're wanting us to take away from your figures. Okay. Any questions?
Okay, Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Crawford, do you have any additional comments that you would like to make about task 2?
Great. Nope.
Covered pretty well.
Okay. I just didn't know if there's anything else that, and remember, task 2 is pretty intensive. There's a lot that you have to do. That's why we've built into your schedule the time that we've built in. You cannot wait. You cannot procrastinate. It's so important that you go ahead and move forward with task 1 and think about task 2 while you're doing task 1, because they're so connected. I mean, and you'll see that once you get into it. So that's so important. And you can, if you have a question, then at the end we'll come back to it and respond to any questions that you may have. Let's move on to task 3.
Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Stedman, can I just interject one thing?
Sure.
And I know I know that I did this several times during our class on Tuesday night, but when you're developing your survey, be sure you are asking questions in those 5 categories. If you're pulling from the teacher working conditions surveys, you don't need to pull anything from facilities, that domain, because those are not asked in those 5 questions. Just make sure you are pulling things that align to those 5 questions in those 5 areas of research. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, this is AAPTEL Task 3, Teacher Empowerment Leadership Growth Plan. Let me go ahead and let me see if I can get this thing going. There. Let me get this out of the way. Let's talk about number 1, the purpose of the growth plan. Once you have successfully completed task 1 and task 2 of the AAPTEL, to include completing a gap analysis and all the other things that Dr. Revis and Dr. Hamilton have mentioned, you will move forward with creating a growth plan for teacher improvement in an identified area or areas of weakness based on the gap analysis, based on what you find. And this is all going to happen as a result of all of the work that you do with task 1 and task 2, and especially when you get to task 2, because you're going to look back and you're going to say, in task 1, this is what the research says. This is what everything I looked at, this is what it says should be happening in all of those identified areas that you're going to be researching. Then when you get to task 2, you're going to be, that's where the rubber hits the road. You're going to say, this is actually what was happening in my school. This is what's happening in my school. So based on the research and what's happening in your school, that's where you and your team are going to identify the weaknesses or the areas that need improvement based on that analysis gap that you find. The growth plan should clearly have a twofold purpose. And when we say growth plan, it's a growth plan for teachers. It could be / a staff development plan, because you're looking at effective staff development for your teachers. And then it's an action plan. So all of those terms fit with what you're doing. This is what purpose number 1. What are those identified areas of concern for teacher leadership and empowerment? Notice what I've got in red. Outside of the classroom, based on the survey, personal observations and knowledge of the school, interviews with teachers, administration, and other stakeholders as applicable. You can include the most recent results from the Teacher Working Conditions Survey or other results based on your state and or district. As Dr. Hamilton said, Cognia or advanced ed, whatever you call it in your school. There may be other instruments as well, but that's the first one. You're trying to find out, the research says this should be happening. This is what I found about teacher leadership and empowerment outside of the classroom. The second thing that you must be concerned about, what are the identified areas of concern for teacher leadership and empowerment inside the classroom? So you're doing 2 things, outside the classroom, inside the classroom, and this is going to be based on the checklist through walkthroughs, personal observations and knowledge of the school, interviews with teachers, administration, and other stakeholders as applicable. This basically is what we call qualitative research. You can also include the most recent results from the Teacher Working Conditions Survey, again, or other results based on your state and or district. So it's a twofold purpose. Things to consider for this growth plan are: you are looking for gaps in all areas related to teacher empowerment and leadership in your school only. Now, you may identify several gaps. You can't always address everything, but this is where it goes back. You have to decide as a team, what is or what are the most pressing needs when it comes to the gaps that you have identified. You are looking at opportunities for needed and relevant staff development based on your gap analysis. And I want to focus on that relevant staff development. How many of you have been engaged in staff development in the past, and when you got in there, when it was all over with, you said, why in the world were we even doing this? It had nothing to do with, that happens. Make sure that whatever you plan, that it is relevant to the needs of the school, and that you're not wasting anybody's time when you get in there, that they're going to grow and you're going to learn from it. You are looking at specific activities needed to be considered for implementation to improve identified areas of need or weakness based on your gap analysis. And then you are looking at specific programs, activities, programs, if applicable, to be considered for implementation to improve identified areas of need, weakness, based on your gap analysis. There's so much in there. And I would think that, this plan is going to be, personal to your school. So honestly, for the most part, if there's 37 of you between our three classes, for the most part, every bit of this should be pretty much very, very different when we read it. Wouldn't you say so, instructors?
Yes, I would.
Yeah. So you just need to remember that. This is very personal to your school. Narrative support for developing the growth plan. Remember, this is writing intensive, so you got to write about it first. There are 10 areas identified for this growth plan that will require an analytic narrative prior to developing this growth plan. The narrative work is a combination of your research, your survey results, your observations, your interviews, your walkthroughs, and anything else completed in task 1 and 2. Each area must be thoroughly addressed. And this is a great time to fully include the assistance of your established PLC. You should not be on an island by yourself when it comes to this. Okay, and this is the number 1 of those 10 areas. Again, this is your heading right here, a vision for positive school improvement. And what I've done, I've just given you some things to think about. Consider work that has already been completed by the school improvement team relative to that. There should be some stuff already there if your school improvement team is working as doing what they're supposed to do. Look at your existing vision and mission statements. What do they say about anything that's applicable to what you're doing with this task? Consider all results from your surveys, your observations, and interviews. Consider your most recent teacher working condition survey or whatever is applicable to your state. And then consider anything else your team and you deem appropriate to be used. You're writing about it. This is narrative work. Now, in this narrative work, it's okay. It's not a research section, but it's okay to reference research that you've done. It's okay to come back here and say, it's okay to do that. But now again, remember, it should be APA, and you have to cite it if you do that. I would highly recommend that in some of these areas where you can, that you do include some of the research that is applicable to that. And you'll say, well, I've already said it. Well, sometimes it just needs to be restated briefly in another way to make what your point that you're trying to make more understandable. Number 2, your heading, documentation to support identified need. This is a suggestion. This is not what you personally think. This should be the results of all the work you have done with task 1 and 2. This is your research in task 1. This is all the work from and in your school that you did in task 2. Okay, it's not your opinion. List of strategic indicators of success. Your team and you will include specific strategies that will indicate how you will be successful with the plan you are implementing. You're going to put strategies in place. And all those strategies are to lend themselves to success. What are those strategies that you're going to put in place? And remember, I said indicators of success. That means that there should be 3 or more in there. Specific short-term and long-term goals and objectives, and there may be a midterm goal in there. It's okay. It's not listed, but if you do, then that's okay as well. What can you do now? And what will you propose to do along the way? That's simply, what you're going to do. What can be done now? What's some immediate attention that you can give to identified problem areas? And then what are some of the things that you want to put in place? It's going to take time to look at them and to implement some things. Next, activities to address identified goals and objectives. Those goals and objectives that you've identified, what are you proposing to do to address those short-term and long-term goals? I've identified these things. How am I going to accomplish these things? These are your proposed, you begin looking at things to help with the solution, towards the solution. So these are going to be your activities that you're looking at. A plan to communicate progress with vital stakeholders. Who will you be communicating this plan with, and how will you get the information out to them? Now, automatically, it's going to be teachers. Automatically, it's going to be administration. There may be others. How are you going to communicate this effectively with all vital stakeholders? Specific timeline of activities. When will you propose to do the various activities outlined in your growth plan for improved teacher empowerment and leadership? You've got to set some parameters. This is when it will begin. This is maybe a benchmark time. This is when we're hoping to end, and we'll come back and we'll do a final assessment and a review of where we are at that time. Timelines are important. What will be your plan for stakeholder involvement and buy-in? Now, again, your major stakeholders are going to be your teachers that you're working with, and your administration must buy in as well. How do you propose to sell your product to the various stakeholders involved? You got to give the best sales pitch ever. How are you going to do it? Specific roles and responsibilities for this action plan. Who is going to do what, and what are they going to do? That's basically it. With everything you've identified, who's going to do it? And then what are they going to do? Formative and summative assessments. Now remember, you're not working with children. So this is formative assessments and summative assessments based on what you're doing with grown people, with adults. So all of this is working with adults for this plan of action. So with formative assessments, how will you know that the adults, the teachers, the staff, administration, stakeholders are doing what is being proposed in this plan with fidelity? Somebody's got to determine that. How are you going to know? And then the summative assessments, how will you know what you are doing is working with and for the teachers and staff? You will need to consider benchmark assessments along the way as well as at the end. After you've done all of that, you're going to talk about what is the purpose of this growth plan. You're going to provide a narrative of the purpose of the growth plan or this action plan after you've done this. And that leads into using the same graphic organizer template for this growth plan that you use to complete your action plan in the AAPTEL. Many of your headings will be different for this growth plan. I'm going to show you something in just a second. You can see the examples provided in your AAPTEL template and your AAPTEL helpful hints. But you're going to set up a growth plan after you've done your purpose. You're going to set up a growth plan using that template based on all of the work you've done with those 10 indicative areas that we just talked about. And once you've done all of that, you've got to present, after it's approved, you've got to present your growth plan. You will schedule a meeting to present to your administration, and it is highly recommended that you present this to your entire teaching staff. You will provide artifacts of proof that you have presented. This will include, at a minimum, a picture of you presenting, but is highly recommended to include a recorded video as well. The printed frames of your PowerPoint presentation, a narrative reflection of the presentation with quotes from the what did your administration have to say about all this? What did the teachers have to say about it if you're able to present to them? We want to know. And this should come in your narrative review of your presentation. I want to bring up something else. This, Dr. Revis, this is archived as well. Dr. Revis did this last semester, and I wanted to point it out. This is actually, this is how it should look at the top. This is an example of how it should look. And then underneath all of that are your various activities that you will indicate from the work that you've done with those 10 items that you're going to analytically and narratively talk about. Again, these are the same analytic narratives that you're going to be talking about. This is in summary. You're going to share it with the school administration and to the SID, record if possible. Presentation, this is what you should have at a minimum. A report of best practices, a visual checklist, a gap analysis, and the growth plan. And then finally, reiterating it again, your analytical and narrative, your growth plan, and your presentation. That's what it's all about. I know you're thinking, Dr. Hamilton, Dr. Revis, Dr. Crawford, did I miss anything at all that you can think of?
Very thorough.
No, I think you covered it very thoroughly. Guys, this task 3 is very similar to what you did with the AAPTEL.
It is.
In the section, the task of the section of the AAPTEL where you were writing your improvement plan. It's the very same thing. So you're just narratively talking about the plan.
Okay. Anything else from you? Okay, Dr. Crawford, you have task 4.
Yeah, good evening, folks. I got the job of kind of cleaning up, and this one is going to be pretty simple because just like what the familiarity with this part of the APTEL, task 4 of the AAPTEL, and if I can find the share button, there it is, should look very familiar to you because you've just done 12 of these competencies in task treatment. From what I've seen from those of us that are with Dr. Hamilton, myself, you guys did an outstanding job, not only in communicating what you were doing with that particular competency, but having a corresponding artifact as well. The big thing now you need to start thinking about, as you look down here, is the internship log. I know we still got some time left, but oftentimes this will get missed. So as you're submitting, so you did 12 with the APTEL, you will do the other 9 with the AAPTEL. So many of you had a different 12 that you did. So basically you'll finish up the ones that you didn't do. Again, you'll find a corresponding artifact, and it's really incumbent to make sure that that artifact really matches that description or that competency. So you want to make this as work-driven as possible. If you were dealing with a specific student, if you were sitting in IEP meetings, if you were asked to help resolve an issue between staff, or you know, you got the Title I department readjusted some salaries. Now all of a sudden you've got another week to spend $10,000. And yes, that happened to me last week, and they told me a day before the deadline. Anyway, you want to make sure that those competencies, what you're writing up, matches that competency, and that that artifact, that thing, as Dr. Lamb calls it, matches what you're doing there. So again, I didn't see any issues with the ones I just looked at for the apps. You did a phenomenal job with those. You will do the exact same thing with the other 9. Remember, you will not place anything here with digital learning competencies, because the entire program, from the APSL to the APSL to the APTEL to the other ones that you will do next semester are all built into that. You will just make sure that you complete the other 9 here, and then make sure that you upload your signed internship logs. I have found that PDFs work best, and then you will be good to go with task 4 of the APTEL.
Thank you, Dr. Crawford. And I'm going to show them one thing that you can find this under week 8. Here it is. And this was a document that's archived. It's the same thing. The APTEL task 4. It lists all of them, all of the competencies, as Dr. Crawford has just shown you. This is the same. And then it tells you, I mean, it reminds you of everything that you did in task and with the APTEL. It just breaks it down. It's got all that information you need under there again, as it relates to task 4. And again, this is found under week 8 in Blackboard. Okay. Any questions at this point as you are thinking about everything that we've said? Any questions? Does this help seeing the big picture and knowing what you're doing and where it's going to end, especially with task 1, 2, and 3? And you should be at a place where you can grasp it and understand it. We couldn't have done this like this with the app, so you were not ready for it, but you're ready for it now. Okay. I hope the quietness is a yes.
I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Hey, Jasmine.
Hey, I do have a question. Can you see me?
I can, yes.
Okay. Hey, I do have a question. With our with us creating the survey, when it comes to APA style, we're taking it from different places. How do we cite that?
Okay, ooh, can I take that one?
Yes, you may, Dr. Crawford.
Please, because me and APA, I just need to know.
Okay, so first things first, I'm gonna need you to get out of the habit of wanting to create your own survey. Okay, if you can find one that is already done, if you can find one that's already using, and I think of that particular question in terms of doing a doctorate, because when you have to create your own survey, there's a whole process of having to prove that the document is valid and reliable, and who did what, and how do you prove that? So do me a favor, save yourself the headache, find one that's already out there.
Okay.
And
One
Dr.
from Whitaker.
Crawford, let me
Yes.
say this. Remember, Jasmine, that's what we talked about on Tuesday night. Remember what
We
Dr.
did. My
Revis?
principal said he has one.
Okay,
Okay,
good,
use it.
good. Then use it.
Okay. Okay.
Go ahead,
So
Dr.
when I
Crawford.
cite that, how am I citing that?
So
If you
if
just
it's,
said I have one for you.
so if it's a district level survey, or if it's one that's been vetted by a school district, then just state that, you know, this survey for reading or this survey for math has been in use by the school district since whatever. So again, don't go looking to make more work than you have to. But I would just cite it as something that's been in use by the district. That saves you the headache of having to cite when and where it's being used.
And
Okay.
that would
Thank
be,
you.
and when you list that as a figure, then that would be your little comment up under there as well, identifying it. And somebody said the site, you would just cite it, you know, APA, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, any of you instructors, you could actually put the school district's name under there where you would normally put an author's name. You would put the school district's name, and you could use the current year. Am I right with that?
Yes.
Yes,
Staff,
yes,
okay,
but I
yes.
think you're talking about a checklist, not a survey.
Right,
So that would be like a checklist. A survey would be something that you're going to send out to teachers to be completed anonymously,
right.
such as questions from the teacher's working conditions survey, which you would just reference the teacher's working conditions survey. You would say that you had
Okay.
taken those questions from.
Right. As long as all of that survey, as long as all those questions came from that one, since that document's already vetted, then just make sure you reference the NCTWC for this year.
That's right.
Okay. Thank
But
you
thank
very
you,
much.
thank you. Jasmine wanted to go ahead and ask that because she didn't want me sending it back to her, telling her to fix it. Right,
I
Jasmine?
knew you were gonna send it. That's why I do not want those issues.
Well, like I told
Thank
some of my
you.
folks, we just do that because we know you all can all do like this perfect 4 work, and we just want you to be able to we're just trying to help you get the very best you can be, because we take
I-
your scores personally. We take them as ours. So
We do.
yeah.
But I like Jasmine's trying to get ahead of the game though, and I like that.
Yes, she is.
Okay, that's a good question. Other questions at this point? Now, what we're going to do is on Tuesday, we'll go back and we will address any questions that you have at that point about task 1. We're not going to go back over all of task 1 again. We're just going to address questions that you may have. And then our focus is going to be more on task 2, and we will hit some points, but everything that I said tonight, I'm not going to go back and say all that again. We're going to talk on Tuesday night. We're going to see where you are, and we're going to address questions and help you. Dr. Revis, we're probably going to talk a little bit about gap analysis and those things as well. But as far as going back over everything that we've covered, we're not going to do that. Okay, Nari?
My question, and I just what Jasmine was saying about the document. I know you all said the district. I got one from my AP to do the walkthroughs with the BTs. That's hers. Like, so how do I cite that? Because it's not. She told me when she gave it to me. She said, "Here, this is straight and simple. 10 minutes. This is." She said, "It's not. We don't
But
use
it's
it in the
considered for
district,
your,
but it's what I
approved,
use."
it's approved by your school, and your district has allowed them to use it. So that's still accepted.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay, all right.
Okay, good question though, Nari. Okay, other questions? Okay, we've given you all the ammunition you need to move forward with, all the tools you need to build your house. Let me put it that way. So go build your house. Staff, thank you so much for the great presentations this evening. They're going to do well with this. I'm expecting nothing but quality work to start coming in very, very soon.
And we've had such high quality work on the app. So our results, we were talking about this, I think Monday in our staff meeting, have been wonderful.
Yes. Yes.
So we're proud of you all.
We are. We were bragging, and Dr. Lamb was bragging on you and to the other staff how well all 3 classes have done with the AAPTEL.
Really.
So don't let us down. Don't let them have to come back at the end and say, "Wow, we shouldn't have said all that." Don't let us down now. Okay.
Dr. Hamilton and I are not going to have to roll up on some professors that go on the web, so that makes us happy too.
Okay. Any comments from any of you professors before we leave? Okay, guys, we will see you on Tuesday. Okay.
Good
night,
night.
everybody.
Yes.
I guess.
Call us if you need us.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Good night.